Have you ever asked yourself if the red you see is the same red I see? It sounds like a silly philosophical question, but neuroscientists and physicists now know it's one of the most important questions about reality, because the answer is mind-blowing. We have no way of knowing. The dress debate of 2015 was scientific proof that two people can look at the exact same object and see entirely different colors. Today, we're going to explore why your brain creates color from scratch and how that changes everything we thought we knew about perception. The philosophical question that science can answer. Have you ever looked at a sunset with friends and wondered if they see the exact same colors you do? That orange-pink glow spreading across the sky might look completely different through someone else's eyes. This question has fascinated humans for thousands of years. Ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle pondered whether we could ever truly know if others experience colors as we do. What was once purely philosophical now has scientific dimensions. Modern neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and physics have given us remarkable insights into how color perception works. And what they found challenges everything we thought we knew about the world around us. Last summer, I was showing my nephew a rainbow after a storm. He pointed to a section and called it green, while I saw it as blue-green. It wasn't a disagreement about words. We were having fundamentally different visual experiences of the same phenomenon. This everyday moment captures the essence of our color perception dilemma. Most of us go through life assuming colors are fixed, objective properties of objects. The grass is green. The sky is blue. That stop sign is red. These feel like simple facts about the physical world. We act as if colors exist independently of us, just waiting to be seen. This common sense view turns out to be completely wrong. The counterintuitive truth is that colors don't actually exist in objects themselves. They aren't physical properties like weight, shape, or size. Instead, color is something your brain creates. It's more like an interpretation than a discovery. This is scientific fact based on what we now know about physics, biology, and neuroscience. Think about a red apple sitting on your kitchen counter. What makes it red? The conventional answer is that the apple contains something, a pigment or material, that is inherently red. But that's not how color works. Apple has physical properties that cause it to absorb certain wavelengths of light and reflect others. Specifically, it absorbs most wavelengths except those in the range we perceive as red. But there's nothing inherently red about those wavelengths either. They're just electromagnetic radiation with particular frequencies. The redness happens in your brain. Your visual system detects these wavelengths and transforms them into the experience of color through an incredibly complex process. Your brain creates a sensation of red based on the patterns of light hitting your retina, your past experiences, the surrounding colors, and even your expectations. Consider this. If no conscious beings existed to perceive it, would a rose still be red? It would still reflect the same wavelengths of light, but without a brain to interpret those wavelengths as red, the quality of redness wouldn't exist. Color is a feature of perception. Science strongly suggests that the color red you see is different from the red others see. The specific quality of your red experience likely differs from mine in subtle or even dramatic ways. Various lines of evidence point to significant variations in how humans perceive color. Even among people with normal color vision, there are measurable differences in our eye structures that influence color perception. The ratio and sensitivity of different types of color receptors in our retinas vary from person to person. Some people have receptors with slightly shifted sensitivity to different wavelengths. These physical differences inevitably lead to variations in color experience. There's also strong evidence from people with atypical color vision. About 8% of men and 0.5% of women have some form of color blindness, where they struggle to distinguish between certain colors that look clearly different to others. Even more fascinating are people with tetrachromacy, mostly women who have 4 types of color receptors instead of the usual 3. Research suggests they may see millions of color distinctions invisible to the rest of us. Our brains also process color information differently based on our experiences, cultural background, and the languages we speak. Russian has separate basic terms for light blue goluboy and dark blue sini, while English uses modifiers for a single blue category. Research shows Russian speakers actually perceive these as more distinct categories than English speakers do. Your cultural and linguistic background literally shapes how you see color. The science of color perception reveals something profound. We each live in our own perceptual worlds. When you and I look at that sunset, we're having related but distinct experiences. We can agree on the names of colors and communicate about them effectively, but the inner experience, what philosophers call qualia, is unique to each person. To understand why color perception works this way, we need to look more closely at what's happening when light hits objects around us. The physics of light reveals why color isn't a fixed property, but a relationship between objects, light, and perceiving minds. When we understand the physics behind color, we begin to see why our perception of the world is both remarkably accurate in some ways and profoundly subjective in others. The physics of light, what color really is. What if I told you that nothing in the world is actually colored at all? That bright red strawberry on your kitchen counter? It's not actually red. The blue sky outside your window? Not blue. Even your favorite green shirt isn't actually green. I know this sounds impossible, but it's true. Color as we know it doesn't exist in the physical world. It's a creation of your brain. To understand this mind-bending concept, we need to look at what light actually is. When scientists talk about color, they're talking about electromagnetic radiation, a form of energy that travels in waves. This electromagnetic spectrum includes radio waves, microwaves, X-rays, gamma rays, and visible light. Visible light makes up only a tiny sliver of this spectrum, positioned between ultraviolet and infrared radiation. This visible portion is the only part our eyes can detect. The wavelength symphony. Within this narrow band of visibility, different wavelengths correspond to different colors. Think of it like a musical scale. Each wavelength plays a different note that our brain interprets as a distinct color. The longest wavelengths we can see appear red to us, measuring about 700 nanometers. The shortest visible wavelengths appear violet at around 400 nanometers. All the colors of the rainbow fall somewhere between these two extremes. Objects themselves don't possess color as an inherent property. What they have is a particular atomic and molecular structure that interacts with light in specific ways. Some wavelengths get absorbed, while others get reflected. The reflected wavelengths reach our eyes and create our experience of color. When white light, containing all visible wavelengths, hits it, the strawberry surface absorbs most wavelengths, particularly those in the blue-green range. It reflects wavelengths in the 600 to 700 nanometer range, which our brains interpret as red. The strawberry itself isn't red. It simply reflects wavelengths that our visual system processes as red while absorbing the rest. The dance of light and objects. This relationship between objects and light becomes clearer when we change the lighting conditions. Colors look different under fluorescent lighting compared to natural sunlight because different light sources emit different wavelength combinations. Sunlight provides a balanced mix of all visible wavelengths, white light. Artificial light sources often have distinctive profiles. Incandescent bulbs emit more wavelengths in the yellow-red range, making everything look warmer. Fluorescent lights might lack certain wavelengths, causing some colors to appear dull or altered. Imagine a red apple in a room illuminated only by pure green light. The apple would appear black or very dark because there are no red wavelengths in the light for it to reflect. The apple can only reflect wavelengths present in the illuminating light. The apple's physical properties remain unchanged, but our perception of its color transforms completely. Beyond simple reflection, photography enthusiasts understand this principle intimately. The golden hour before sunset creates warm tones because the atmosphere filters out more blue light, leaving a higher proportion of red and yellow wavelengths. The objects themselves remain unchanged, only the available light differs. Even more fascinating are structural colors, those created not by pigments but by physical structures that manipulate light. The shimmer of butterfly wings or the changing hues of soap bubbles come from microscopic structures that cause light wave interference. These structures selectively reflect specific wavelengths depending on the viewing angle, creating colors that shift as you move. Color in the mind. Here's the crucial insight. These wavelengths of light are not themselves colored. A 605 nanometer wavelength isn't inherently red. It's just energy traveling at a particular wavelength. The redness happens when your visual system detects this wavelength and transforms it into the experience of red. The wavelength itself is colorless. It's pure physics. The color exists only in your perception. This explains why different animals see colors differently. Bees can see ultraviolet patterns on flowers invisible to us. Many mammals see fewer colors than we do. The mantis shrimp has 16 different photoreceptor types compared to our 3. These animals experience entirely different color worlds, even though they're looking at the same physical objects reflecting identical wavelengths. If no conscious beings existed to perceive it, would a rose still be red? It would still reflect wavelengths around 650 nanometers, but without a visual system to interpret those wavelengths as red, the quality of redness wouldn't exist. The physics would remain, but the experience of color would not. Color is something our brains create, not something we discover in the world. Color is our brain's interpretation of light wavelengths, not a physical property. This raises a fascinating question. If colors are created by our brains based on wavelengths of light, how exactly does our visual system detect these different wavelengths? What happens between the moment light enters your eyes and the moment you experience the vivid world of color? The answer lies in the remarkable technology built into your eyes, the amazing technology in your eyes. Your eyes contain technology so advanced that scientists are still trying to fully understand how it works. Even with our most sophisticated cameras and sensors, we still can't replicate the incredible way your eyes capture and process color. Your visual system is essentially a biological marvel that transforms simple wavelengths of light into the rich, colorful world you experience every day. At the back of your eye sits a thin layer of tissue called the retina. Think of it as a biological movie screen where light is captured after passing through your pupil and lens. This living display contains specialized cells called photoreceptors that respond to light. These photoreceptors come in two main varieties, rods and cones. Rods handle vision in low light conditions but don't contribute much to color vision. Cones are your color specialists. They're concentrated in the center of your retina, particularly in a small depression called the fovea, which is responsible for your detailed central vision. What makes human vision special compared to most other mammals is the number of different cone types we possess. Most mammals have only 2 types of cones, giving them dichromatic vision. They see fewer colors than we do, similar to how a person with red-green color blindness would experience the world. Dogs see primarily in blues and yellows, with reds and greens appearing as grayish shades. This explains why your dog might struggle to find that bright red ball in green grass. They genuinely can't see the color contrast that's obvious to you. Humans, along with other primates, typically have 3 types of cones, giving us trichromatic vision. This third cone type evolved in our primate ancestors, providing an evolutionary advantage in spotting colorful, ripe fruits among green foliage. This additional cone type expands the range of colors we can perceive, allowing us to distinguish millions of different color shades. Each cone type responds to different wavelength ranges of light. Scientists label these as S cones, short wavelengths, M cones, medium wavelengths, and L cones, long wavelengths. While commonly called blue, green, and red cones, their sensitivity actually overlaps considerably. S cones respond most strongly to blue-violet wavelengths around 420 to 440 nanometers. M cones peak in sensitivity around 534 to 545 nanometers in the green-yellow range. L cones are most sensitive to yellow-red wavelengths around 564 to 580 nanometers. At the molecular level, cones contain light-sensitive molecules called photopigments, composed of a protein called opsin combined with a form of vitamin A. When light strikes these photopigments, the retinal portion physically changes shape, like a microscopic light switch flipping. This shape change begins the transformation of light energy into electrical signals your brain can understand. This process, called phototransduction, is remarkably complex. The shape change triggers a cascade of chemical reactions within the cone cell, activating proteins that alter the electrical charge of the cell membrane. While modern digital cameras use pixels that simply count photons, your cones perform sophisticated biochemistry to convert light into neural signals, more like tiny chemistry labs than simple light detectors. The architecture of cone cells maximizes their light-catching capability. Their outer segments contain stacked membranous discs packed with photopigment molecules, creating an expanded surface area for capturing light, similar to how solar panels are designed to maximize energy collection. Individual cone types don't perceive specific colors on their own. Color perception emerges from activation patterns across all 3 cone types. When light enters your eye, it activates each cone type to different degrees. Yellow light, for example, strongly stimulates both L and M cones while activating S cones very little. Your brain interprets this pattern, strong L, strong M, weak S, as yellow. This ratio-based system explains how we perceive colors like purple, brown, or pink, even though there are no single wavelengths corresponding to these colors. Purple occurs when both rest cones blue and L cones red are stimulated, but M cones green are not something that doesn't happen with a single wavelength of light. The genetics behind these color sensing cells reveal another layer of complexity. The genes for red and green photopigments are located on the X chromosome, explaining why red-green color blindness affects about 8% of men but less than 1% of women. Women have two X chromosomes, providing a backup if one carries a mutation, while men have no such backup. After cones convert light into electrical signals, these signals travel through several layers of neurons before forming your optic nerve, a direct pathway to your brain. These signals contain no inherent color information. They're just patterns of electrical activity. Your brain transforms these electrical patterns into vivid colors. The signals travel to your visual cortex, where specialized neurons respond to particular cone activation patterns. Your brain actively constructs your color experience using these signals as raw material, turning simple wavelengths into the rich tapestry of colors that make up your visual world. Your brain, the ultimate color creator. What if I told you that color doesn't exist until your brain invents it? Everything you just learned about light wavelengths and specialized cells in your eyes is only the beginning of the story. The electrical signals from your retina are essentially just raw data. They contain no color at all. Color is something your brain creates from scratch. Think about those electrical signals traveling from your eyes. They zip along your optic nerve, a bundle of about 1 million nerve fibers connecting each eye to your brain. These signals aren't coded as red or blue. They're just patterns of electrical impulses, like binary code in a computer or unedited footage waiting to be transformed into a finished film. The magic of color perception happens when your brain interprets this code. When these signals reach your brain, they first arrive at a structure called the lateral geniculate nucleus, LGN, which acts like a relay station. From there, the information travels to the primary visual cortex, located at the very back of your brain in the occipital lobe. This journey transforms raw data into meaningful visual information. Scientists call this area V1, and it's where the first real processing of visual information begins. V1 doesn't process color directly. Instead, it breaks down the visual scene into basic components like edges, orientations, and contrasts. Think of it as identifying the outlines and boundaries of objects. This information is essential for recognizing shapes, but it still doesn't include what we think of as color. The signals then flow to other specialized areas of your visual cortex. One particularly important region is called V4, which specializes in color processing. When scientists study people with damage to Area 5-4, they find something remarkable. These individuals can see forms and movement perfectly well, but their world appears in shades of gray. This condition, called cerebral achromatopsia, provides strong evidence that color is created by specific brain regions. What's happening in V4 and other color processing areas is sophisticated processing comparing the relative activation of different cone types. For instance, a strong signal from L cones compared to M cones might indicate redness, while similar activation of L and M cones with little S cone activation might signify yellow. These comparisons happen automatically and outside your conscious awareness. Your brain actively constructs your color experience based on context, expectations, and past experiences. This is why color perception is about your brain making sense of wavelengths in relation to the entire visual scene. A perfect example of this active construction is color constancy. Have you noticed how a white piece of paper still looks white, whether you're viewing it in the yellow light of a sunset, the blue light of a clear sky, or artificial fluorescent bulbs? Physically, that paper reflects completely different wavelength combinations in each lighting condition. Yet your brain adjusts for these differences and perceives the paper as consistently white. Your brain accomplishes this by analyzing the entire visual scene and making assumptions about lighting conditions. It calculates the relationships between different surfaces and their reflected light, then adjusts your color perception to maintain consistency. This process is automatic, but without it, colors would change dramatically with every lighting shift, making the world confusingly unstable. This process creates a useful model of the world. Your brain prioritizes identifying objects consistently over accurately representing raw wavelengths. It's constructing a practical view of reality rather than a physically precise one. Your brain also fills in missing information and makes predictions about color. Consider what happens at the edges of your visual field where color sensitivity is reduced because there are fewer cones. Your brain doesn't show you a colorless periphery. It fills in what it expects based on the center of your vision and past experience. Languages across the world divide the color spectrum differently. Research shows that these linguistic categories influence how quickly you can distinguish between colors. People distinguish colors more readily when they cross a language boundary in their native language. For example, Russian speakers who have separate terms for light blue and dark blue can distinguish between these shades more quickly than English speakers who use a single category blue. Your cultural and linguistic background shapes how your brain processes color. The categories your language provides influence the comparisons your brain makes when constructing color perception. The brain's active role in constructing color explains why people perceive colors differently. Though most humans have the same basic visual system architecture, variations in cone cells create differences in color perception between individuals. Your experience of color isn't a direct window onto physical reality. It's a construction your brain creates to help you navigate the world. The redness of an apple or the blueness of the sky exists only in your mind as interpretations of wavelength data. This explains the famous 2015 dress debate when a photograph created widespread perceptual disagreement. Some people saw the dress as blue and black, while others saw white and gold. Both groups viewed identical pixels, but their brains constructed different color experiences based on different assumptions about lighting. This visible proof shows what neuroscientists have known for years. In February 2015, not a simple photograph of a dress posted on social media divided the internet in a way no one expected. What started as a casual wedding photo became a global phenomenon that sparked heated debates among friends, families, and even celebrities. The question seemed simple. Was the dress blue and black or white and gold? But the answer revealed something profound about human perception. You probably remember this viral moment. One person would look at the image and see a clearly blue and black dress. Someone sitting right next to them, looking at the exact same screen, would insist it was obviously white and gold. Arguments erupted everywhere, in homes, offices, and across social media platforms. People couldn't believe others were seeing something completely different from what seemed so obvious to them. Brain imaging studies confirmed that people were genuinely perceiving different colors when looking at the identical image. The photo had unintentionally created a perfect perceptual illusion that exposed how our brains construct color rather than simply detecting it. The original image showed a striped dress hanging against a partially washed out background. The lighting was ambiguous. Bright areas suggested either illumination or camouflage without clear visual information about the conditions. This ambiguity was key to why people saw such different colors. Remember color constancy? That's the brain's ability to perceive an object's true color regardless of lighting conditions. When you see a white piece of paper in yellow evening light, your brain compensates for the yellowish illumination and still perceives the paper as white. Your brain makes assumptions about the lighting and effectively subtracts it to determine what it believes are the actual colors. The dress photo contained ambiguous lighting cues that allowed two equally valid interpretations. Your brain had to decide, was this dress photographed in bright light or in shadow? Without enough contextual information, your brain made an assumption based on your past experiences and visual processing tendencies. If your brain assumed the dress was in shadow or dim blue light, it would compensate by mentally adding yellow. This adjustment would transform blue to white and black to gold. This happened for people who saw a white and gold dress. Their brains were unconsciously correcting for assumed bluish shadow light. Conversely, if your brain assumed bright yellowish light or camouflage overexposure, it would compensate by mentally adding blue. This would cause you to see blue and black, as your visual system corrected for perceived yellowish illumination. Neither interpretation was wrong. Both were valid ways for the brain to resolve an ambiguous visual stimulus. The dress itself was actually blue and black in reality, as confirmed by the manufacturer, but people who saw white and gold were experiencing a genuine perceptual difference based on how their brains interpreted the lighting conditions. Scientists found that past visual experiences might determine which interpretation your brain chooses. People with more exposure to natural daylight might assume the dress is in shadow, seeing white gold, while those with more exposure to artificial lighting might assume bright light conditions. Research suggests that night owls who experience more artificial light tend to see blue or black, while morning people often see white/gold. Individual physiology may also play a role. Differences in cone cells in your retina could influence which interpretation your brain favors. The dress illusion exploited a fundamental feature of our visual system. Color perception isn't a direct recording of wavelengths. It's a construction process where your brain uses context to infer colors under assumed lighting conditions. When those contextual cues are ambiguous, different brains reach different conclusions. What makes this phenomenon powerful is that it's not a conscious choice. You can't simply decide to see the dress differently. Your perception feels undeniably correct, illustrating how many perceptual processes happen automatically outside conscious control. Some people reported switching between seeing blue and black and white/gold, either spontaneously or through concentration. This demonstrates the brain's ability to reconsider its assumptions when actively trying to resolve ambiguity. But most people were locked into one interpretation and found it nearly impossible to see the alternative. The dress debate became a cultural phenomenon because it made visible a process that normally happens invisibly. Most of the time, our brains agree on basic perceptual experiences. The dress created a perfect storm of visual ambiguity that split people into distinct perceptual camps. This reveals that our experience of reality isn't a direct window onto the physical world. What we perceive is actually a model constructed by our brains based on sensory input combined with assumptions, past experiences, and expectations. The dress momentarily exposed the constructive nature of perception by creating a situation where different brains constructed fundamentally different models from identical input. The dress debate provided scientists with a natural experiment that revealed profound insights about human perception. It showed that people can literally see the world differently, not because they're being difficult, but because their brains create different yet equally valid interpretations of ambiguous information. This understanding challenges our assumptions about shared reality and raises fascinating questions about perception itself. When we recognize that our experience of color is constructed rather than detected, we begin to wonder what other aspects of our perceptual world might exist only in our minds. The shocking truth: we all live in different color worlds. What if I told you that we're all living in slightly different versions of reality? Right now, you and I could be looking at the exact same object yet experiencing completely different colors. This isn't science fiction, it's how human perception actually works. While we use the same color names to communicate with each other, the subjective experience of those colors varies from person to person in ways we're only beginning to understand. From the moment we're born, our color perception develops in unique ways. Our genetic makeup serves as the foundation. The genes for red and green photopigments are particularly variable since they're located on the X chromosome and share about 98% of their DNA sequence. These genetic variations create measurable differences in how people perceive colors, especially in the red-green range. Think of it like this. Each person's color perception is like their own personal playlist. The song's colors have the same names, but how they sound and appear varies based on your unique perceptual equipment. When you and your friend argue about whether a shirt is blue or purple, you might both be right. Your cone cells respond differently to those wavelengths. Neither of you is wrong. You're experiencing your own slice of reality. The distribution of cone types in your retina varies between individuals. Some people have more L cones, others more M cones. These differences create subtle variations even among people with normal color vision. You might excel at distinguishing shades of red while someone else differentiates greens more precisely. The most dramatic example occurs in tetrachromacy, a condition where a person has 4 types of cone cells instead of 3. This affects perhaps 12% of women. While most of us see about 1 million color variations, tetrachromats potentially perceive 100 times more. Their 4th cone type gives them sensitivity to wavelengths others can't distinguish. Imagine seeing colors between the familiar rainbow bands that most people can't perceive. That's the reality for tetrachromats. Where you see uniform blue sky, they might see subtle variations invisible to everyone else. Their color world contains richer variations than what most humans experience. Conversely, about 8% of men and 0.5% of women have some form of color vision deficiency. Someone with deuteranomally struggles to distinguish between reds, greens, browns, and oranges. They see colors, just different ones than those with typical vision. Their reality is equally valid, just different. Our perception changes throughout life. As we age, our eye lenses gradually yellow, filtering out more blue light. Older adults literally see the world through more yellowish filters. Blues appear less vivid, and the overall color balance shifts toward yellow and brown tones. An 80-year-old and a 20-year-old looking at the same sky experience measurably different colors. These physical differences are just the beginning. Our perception is also shaped by experiences, cultural background, and language. Russian speakers, who would have separate terms for light blue goluboy and dark blue sini, distinguish between these shades more quickly than English speakers. Their language creates distinct color categories that shape their perception. Similarly, the Himba people of Namibia easily distinguish between green shades that look identical to most Westerners because their language categorizes colors differently. Cultural experiences shape our associations with color. White represents purity in Western cultures, but mourning in many Asian cultures. These associations don't change the wavelengths we perceive, but they influence how we experience colors emotionally. Context and memory affect our color experiences too. Your brain fills in the expected yellow color even when viewing a black and white image of a banana. The surrounding colors can dramatically change how we perceive an object's color, as countless optical illusions demonstrate. All these factors create a profound truth. We each live in our own perceptual color world. When we look at a sunset together, we're having related but distinct experiences. We can agree on color names and communicate effectively, but the inner experience, what philosophers call qualia, remains unique to each person. Can two people looking at the same object truly see different colors? Absolutely. It happens constantly without our awareness. The differences might be subtle. Variations in how vibrant a red appears or how easily you distinguish between similar blues. But sometimes, as with the viral dress debate, these differences become dramatically apparent. This doesn't mean we live in completely separate worlds. There's enough overlap in our experiences for effective communication. But it does mean that the specific quality of your read experience might differ from mine in ways we can never fully know. Each of us experiences a unique version of reality, our own personal color world. It's a glimpse into one of consciousness's deepest mysteries, how physical processes create subjective experiences. Through animal eyes, alien color worlds. Imagine seeing colors that humans can't even comprehend. Welcome to the world of animal vision. When we think about how we see color, we often assume our experience is universal. But the truth is that across the animal kingdom, color vision varies dramatically. Different species have evolved visual systems perfectly suited to their environments and needs, creating color worlds that would seem completely alien to us. If we could somehow step into the eyes of different animals, we'd experience reality in ways that might seem like science fiction. Picture landscapes transform familiar scenes rendered unrecognizable through different visual systems. Many creatures perceive a limited colored palette, while others detect visual information completely invisible to humans. These variations represent entirely different ways of experiencing the world. What's particularly fascinating is that many animals see colors we can't even imagine, while others see fewer colors than we do. Our human color vision, while impressive, sits somewhere in the middle of this spectrum. Many animals have visual abilities that make our color perception seem quite limited by comparison. Take your pet dog or cat, for example. Unlike humans with our 3 types of color-detecting cone cells, dogs and cats are dichromatic, possessing only 2 cone types in their retinas. This makes them partially colorblind, particularly the red-green distinctions. Imagine your dog's confusion when that bright red ball seemingly disappears against green grass. To them, both appear as similar grayish or brownish shades. Dogs and cats primarily perceive the world in blues and yellows. Before feeling sorry for their limited palette, consider their visual superpowers. Their retinas contain many more rod cells than ours, giving them remarkable vision in dim light. While we stumble near darkness, your cat navigates effortlessly, trading color richness for nighttime clarity, an adaptation that served their ancestors well as twilight hunters. While our furry companions see less colorful worlds, birds soar through a visual landscape far more vibrant than our own. These feathered marvels are tetrachromatic, possessing 4 cone types compared to our 3. Their 4th cone allows them to see ultraviolet light, opening an entire dimension of color hidden from human eyes. Imagine looking at an ordinary yellow flower and seeing intricate ultraviolet patterns, natural landing strips guiding the way to nectar. This enhanced visual system reveals information invisible to humans. What appears as an ordinary plain-colored bird to us might display extraordinary UV reflective plumage to potential mates. Birds also possess special oil droplets in their combs that act as filters, enhancing their color discrimination abilities. Their world shimmers with nuances we can never experience. Imagine seeing colors beyond the limits of our rainbow. Moving from air to sea, we encounter perhaps the most extraordinary visual system in the animal kingdom, the mantis shrimp. While birds add one extra cone type to their vision, these remarkable crustaceans boast an astonishing 12 to 16 different photoreceptors compared to our mere 3. Initially, scientists assumed they must perceive millions more color distinctions than humans. Surprisingly, research suggests mantis shrimp don't necessarily see more colors than we do. They process color information completely differently. While humans compare the activation of 3 cone types to determine color, mantis shrimp may use each photoreceptor as a specialized detector tuned to specific colors important for survival. Imagine having instant color recognition without the computational delays our brains experience. This unique approach allows mantis shrimp to make color distinctions almost instantly. Some species can even detect polarized light, enhancing contrast in their underwater home. Their vision represents an entirely different evolutionary solution. Rather than processing fewer inputs in complex ways like us, they develop numerous specialized receptors that quickly identify specific colors, perfect for split-second decisions in competitive reef environments. The diverse visual systems across the animal kingdom reveal something profound. Color exists not as an inherent property of objects, but as a creation of the perceiving mind. The wavelengths we call blue might register completely differently to a bee or remain invisible to a dog. Different animals create different color experiences from identical physical stimuli. What we call red is simply our human way of experiencing certain wavelengths. A butterfly might perceive those same wavelengths entirely differently. This diversity in perception reminds us that our human experience represents just one way of translating reality, shaped by our evolutionary history and biological framework. But what happens when human color vision develops atypically? Color blindness and other variations in human perception offer fascinating insights into how our visual systems normally function and adapt when processing visual information differently. When colors change, color blindness and brain plasticity. What happens when someone's brain creates colors differently than most people? For about 8% of men and 0.5% of women, the world appears in a different color palette than what the majority of people experience. This variation in human color perception, commonly known as color blindness, isn't a flaw, but simply a different way that some brains process visual information. Color blindness occurs because of genetic variations that affect the cone cells in our retinas. Remember those specialized cells we talked about earlier? In people with typical color vision, 3 types of cones work together to detect different wavelengths of light. But for someone with color blindness, one or more of these cone types might be missing or function differently, creating a unique visual experience. When we talk about color blindness, many people imagine a black and white world, like an old movie. This misconception misses the fascinating reality. People with color blindness see colors, just different ones than people with standard color vision perceive. Their world is colored differently, but equally valid, based on different patterns of cone activation in their retinas. The most common form affects how people distinguish between reds and greens, occurring because of variations in either the L cones, red detecting, or M cones, green detecting. Because these genes are located on the X chromosome, men with only one X chromosome experience this condition much more frequently than women, who have a second X chromosome that can compensate for variations. Take Michael, for instance, a graphic designer who discovered his red-green color blindness in art school. When working on a project with color-coded data, what his colleagues saw as distinct red and green categories appeared to him as nearly identical shades of brown. He now relies on digital color-picking tools and labels his files with color names to ensure his work matches client expectations, though his personal experience of those colors remains uniquely his own. Different types of color blindness create different experiences. Someone with deuteranopia, green blindness, perceives greens often as more reddish or brownish. A person with protanopia, red blindness, sees red as more brownish or dark. Tritanopia, blue blindness, makes distinguishing between blues and yellows difficult. What's remarkable is how the brain adapts to these differences. For someone who has been colorblind since birth, their brain creates a coherent map of the visual world based on available information. Their experience of color is their normal, and their brain organizes this information effectively for navigating daily life. People with color blindness often develop alternative strategies for identifying colors when necessary. They might focus on brightness, texture, or position rather than hue. Someone who can't easily distinguish traffic lights might focus on positions. Top light means stop, bottom means go. They learn that grass is green and bricks are red, not because they see these colors the same way that others do, but because they've associated objects with their culturally designated color names. The brain uses multiple cues beyond wavelength to determine perceived color. Context matters tremendously. People with color blindness become particularly adept at using contextual cues to make color judgments that match what others expect, even if their perceptual experience differs. Many don't realize their color perception differs from others until well into childhood or adulthood. Since we can't directly compare subjective experiences, it's impossible to know if what you call green looks the same to everyone. People with color blindness learn the same color names for objects, applying those names to their unique perceptual experiences. The differences become apparent only during specific color discrimination tasks. In some cases, color blindness offers advantages. Research suggests that people with red-green color blindness may better detect camouflage or see through certain visual clutter because they rely more on texture and brightness. During World War II, military forces sought out colorblind individuals for reconnaissance missions because of their enhanced ability to spot camouflage objects. Modern technology creates new possibilities for people with color blindness. Special glasses can help some distinguish between similar colors. Smartphone apps identify colors in the environment. Designers increasingly create colorblind-friendly visual information using distinctive patterns and brightness differences rather than relying solely on color. What causes color blindness and how does it affect perception? Missing or altered cone types create different color experiences, not an absence of color. The brain constructs a rich, colorful world, just one that organizes color space differently than the majority experience. This variation in how human brains process visual information produces equally real and valid colors, just different ones. The variety of color experiences within humans reminds us that perception isn't a direct window onto physical reality, but a construction, a useful model our brains create. The brain's ability to adapt to perceptual differences, creating a functional experience regardless of the specific hardware available. Mind games demonstrates the remarkable flexibility of our perceptual systems. Your brain is constantly playing tricks on you, and color illusions prove it. These aren't just fun visual puzzles. They're windows into how your brain actually constructs your experience of color. What these illusions reveal is that your perception of color isn't a simple recording of wavelengths hitting your eyes. It's an active, complex construction that your brain creates based on multiple factors. Some of the most powerful color illusions show how context dramatically changes what color you perceive. Look at two identical gray squares placed in different surroundings, one surrounded by dark colors and one by light colors. Even though they reflect exactly the same wavelengths to your eye, the square surrounded by dark colors will appear lighter than the identical square surrounded by light colors. Your brain responds to the relationship between the square and its surroundings rather than the absolute amount of light. The famous checker shadow illusion created by Professor Edward Adelson of MIT demonstrates this principle perfectly. In this illusion, two squares on a checkerboard, one in shadow and one in light, appear to be different shades of gray. But when you measure the actual light reflected from each square, they're identical. Your brain compensates for the shadow automatically without your conscious control. Why does your brain do this? Because it's trying to determine the true properties of objects regardless of lighting conditions. In the real world, a white object in shadow and a black object in bright light might reflect the same amount of light to your eye. Your visual system has evolved to discount these lighting variations so you can recognize objects consistently. This phenomenon, called color constancy, is crucial for navigating the world, but leads to fascinating perceptual errors in certain situations. Color constancy explains why the viral dress appeared blue or black to some people and white or gold to others. Your brain made different assumptions about the lighting conditions in the photo. Those who saw a blue dress in yellow light perceived it as white and gold, compensating for yellow light by adding blue. Those who saw a white gold dress in blue shadow perceived it as blue and black, compensating for blue shadow by adding yellow. Neither group was wrong. They were simply making different unconscious assumptions about lighting. Prepare to see your perception transform before your eyes. Stare at a brightly colored image for about 30 seconds, then look at a white surface. What happens next will change how you understand your visual system. A ghost image appears in the complementary color. Red produces green. Blue creates yellow. This happens because the cone cells detecting the original color become fatigued. When you shift to white, which contains all wavelengths, the unfatigued cones respond more strongly, creating the perception of the complementary color. As one research source explains, The cones can get fatigued if you stare at a brightly colored image for too long, and the cones will stop responding. When the image changes to white, the ghosted stripes on the white card look red. This is because the cones that detect the color red are still ready to fire, while the cones that detect the other colors are tired. Memory and expectation also influence how you perceive color. Show someone a slightly ambiguous color that could be either brown or purple on an object strongly associated with one of those colors, like a banana or an eggplant, and their brain will push perception toward the expected color. Knowledge about typical object colors influences what we actually see. The Bayes-Alt effect further demonstrates how dramatically adjacent colors affect perception. The same red square appears entirely different when surrounded by yellow versus when surrounded by blue. Similarly, the color context illusion shows how surrounding colors can make identical gray eyes appear to be different colors. Your visual system processes colors through comparison, not isolation. These illusions reveal fundamental truths about vision. Your perception of color depends on the surrounding colors, creating contrast effects. Your brain's assumptions about lighting conditions, the history of recent stimulation of your visual system, your memories and expectations about typical object colors, the overall context of the scene. The implication is profound. Color isn't a fixed property of the world that your brain passively records. It's a construction your brain creates to help you make sense of your environment. Different brains, given the same visual input, can construct different color experiences. The colors you see aren't properties of objects, but interpretations your brain creates based on complex calculations. This explains why two people can look at the same object and genuinely see different colors. Their brains might make different. Assumptions have different prior experiences or process visual information slightly differently. Neither person is wrong. They're experiencing their own valid interpretation of the physical stimulus. What optical illusions reveal about the subjective nature of color is that context fundamentally influences what colors you perceive. Your visual system constructs colors based on multiple factors beyond just wavelengths. The color you see is your brain's best guess about what's out there, not a direct recording of physical reality. Even when we know about an illusion, even when we measure identical wavelengths from patches that look different, we cannot force ourselves to see them as the same. The construction of color happens at levels of neural processing below conscious control, revealing how our experience of reality is shaped by mechanisms we cannot directly access. The mood-color connection, how feelings shape perception. Did you know your emotions might literally change the colors you see? This isn't just a poetic metaphor about seeing the world through rose-colored glasses when you're happy or feeling blue when you're sad. Research suggests that your emotional state can physically alter how your visual system processes color information, creating measurable differences in what colors you actually perceive. Think about those days when you're feeling down. The world might actually appear more gray and less vibrant. Not just metaphorically, but in a real, perceptual sense. I remember one particularly difficult week when nothing in my usually colorful garden seemed to pop. The reds looked dull, the yellows muted. It wasn't until my mood lifted that the vibrancy returned. Scientists have found evidence supporting this experience. People experiencing depression often report seeing the world in more muted tones, reflecting actual changes in visual processing. Studies show that people with depression experience what researchers call reduced contrast sensitivity. They have more difficulty distinguishing between similar shades and perceiving boundaries between different colors. The world appears less vibrant and less clearly defined. As one researcher described, it's as if the brain's visual system is turning down the contrast knob, making everything appear more flat and uniform. This effect is particularly pronounced along the blue-yellow axis of color perception. People experiencing depression or anxiety show measurable differences in their ability to discriminate between blues and yellows compared to people without these conditions. The connection is so strong that some researchers have proposed using color perception tests as potential diagnostic tools for mood disorders. The explanation lies in the relationship between our brain's emotional and visual processing systems. These systems interact through shared neural pathways and chemical messengers. The neurotransmitters regulating our mood also influence visual processing. Serotonin, our natural happiness booster, helps regulate how visual information moves through different parts of the brain. When you're feeling joyful, this chemical doesn't just elevate your mood, it actually enhances how vividly you perceive colors. Similarly, dopamine, our pleasure chemical, influences the retina's ability to detect contrast and process color information. When you're anxious, your brain releases stress hormones that prepare for potential danger. These hormones sharpen certain aspects of vision like motion detection and peripheral awareness, but reduce color sensitivity. This makes evolutionary sense. Quickly spotting movement is more important than appreciating rich colors when facing danger. Conversely, positive emotions enhance color perception. People in positive mood states perform better on color discrimination tests and show greater sensitivity to color contrasts. When you're feeling good, the world appears more colorful in your actual perceptual experience. This relationship works in both directions. Colors also trigger emotional responses that influence perception. These associations form in early childhood and are shaped by personal experiences and cultural factors. Different cultures assign various meanings to colors, evoking specific emotional responses. In Western cultures, red often signifies danger or passion, while in Chinese culture it represents good luck. These emotional associations create neural connections that influence how we perceive and respond to colors. When you see a color strongly associated with a particular emotion, your brain activates neural networks linked to that emotion, which then feed back into your visual processing. This creates a loop where your emotional response to a color can change how you perceive that color and others around it. Marketing professionals understand this connection and strategically use color to influence emotions and behaviors. Fast food restaurants use red and yellow because they stimulate appetite and create urgency. Luxury brands use deep purples and blacks to evoke sophistication. Hospital walls often feature soft blues and greens because these colors reduce anxiety and promote calm. In one revealing study, researchers induced different emotional states in participants and tested their color perception. People feeling sad were more likely to perceive neutral colors as bluish, while those feeling happy perceived a warm bias. Researchers measured these perceptual differences using standard color matching tests. The implications extend beyond understanding how our minds work. They help explain why light therapy effectively treats certain types of depression, particularly seasonal affective disorder. Exposure to particular light wavelengths might change how our brains process visual information, influencing mood through shared neural pathways. Can your mood actually change how you see colors? Research strongly suggests yes. Your emotions influence the neural pathways and chemical messengers involved in color processing, creating measurable differences in visual perception. This connection between emotion and perception reveals something profound about our brains. There's no clear dividing line between emotional states and sensory experiences. They're deeply interconnected, with each influencing the other through complex neural networks. If something as seemingly basic and objective as color can be influenced by emotions, expectations, and cultural background, what does this tell us about our experience of reality more broadly? How much of what we perceive as obvious truth about the world is actually constructed by our minds? These questions lead us to remarkable insights about the nature of consciousness itself. Reality check: what color tells us about consciousness? If color exists only in our minds, what does that tell us about everything else we experience? Throughout this journey, we've seen how color isn't a property of objects themselves, but a creation of our brains. This reveals something profound about consciousness and reality that goes far beyond just color perception. Think about what this means. The rich, vibrant world of color that feels so real and objective to you is actually a construction of your mind. When you look at a blue sky or a red apple, you're experiencing your brain's interpretation of wavelengths of light. The blueness of blue and the redness of red exist only in minds like yours. This realization opens up a much bigger question. If something as fundamental as color is created by our brains rather than existing in the external world, what other aspects of our experience might be similarly constructed? The smooth textures we feel, the sweet taste we enjoy, the melodic sounds we hear, are these direct perceptions of reality, or are they also constructions of our minds based on physical stimuli? Like an artist who transforms a landscape into a painting, your brain transforms raw sensory data into a meaningful experience of reality. The canvas may contain the same pigments for every artist, but each creates a unique interpretation, just as our brains create our unique perceptual worlds. Philosophers call these subjective experiences qualia, the felt quality of our experiences, what it's like to see red or taste chocolate. Neuroscientist David Chalmers frames this as the hard problem of consciousness. How do physical brain processes create subjective experiences? We can map which parts of the brain activate when you see colors and understand how photoreceptors respond to light, but this doesn't explain why these processes create the subjective experience of color rather than no experience at all. Neuroscience has identified neural correlates of consciousness, brain activity patterns associated with specific conscious experiences. A study in current biology demonstrated scientists can effectively read minds by decoding brain activity associated with seeing different colors. This research reveals how our conscious experiences arise from measurable physical processes, even though we still don't understand the fundamental mechanism of this transformation. Color perception vividly illustrates how the same physical input creates different conscious experiences in different people. When two people look at the famous dress and see completely different colors, despite receiving identical wavelength information, it demonstrates consciousness isn't simply processing physical information. It involves active construction and interpretation. Virtual and augmented reality technologies further demonstrate how easily our brains construct different realities. By manipulating the light entering your eyes, VR headsets make you feel present in non-physical worlds. Your brain builds a compelling sense of reality from artificial inputs, reinforcing that what we experience as reality is actively constructed rather than passively received. As perception researcher Richard Gregory explains in Seeing, through illusions, we are constantly deceived because we rely on clues like shading and color strength for depth, and on a series of assumptions of how our world functions. Our perception is an active process of interpretation based on assumptions and prior experiences. This understanding of perception as construction raises profound questions about reality itself. If our perceptual experiences are brain constructions rather than direct access to physical reality, what is physical reality actually like? Is there a true reality beyond our perceptions, or is reality inherently perspective-dependent? Some philosophers argue there's a mind-dependent reality we can never know directly. We only know our brain's model of reality. Others propose more radical views, suggesting consciousness itself is fundamental to reality rather than emerging from physical processes. What does this mean about the nature of reality? Our experience isn't a direct window onto the world, but a construction of our brains. The world as it appears to you, full of colors, sounds, smells, and textures, is your brain's model of reality, not reality itself. This doesn't mean the external world doesn't exist. It means your experience of that world is mediated by your perceptual systems and shaped by your brain's interpretive processes. This isn't cause for alarm. Our brain's model of reality has proven remarkably useful for navigating the world. Evolution has shaped our perceptual systems to create models that allow us to interact with our environment successfully. Your perception of a red apple might not capture the apple's intrinsic nature, but it does allow you to find and eat the apple. Understanding perception's constructed nature brings us to a new appreciation for the incredible power of our minds. Your brain isn't simply recording the world, it's actively creating your experience of reality. The rich, colorful world you inhabit exists because your brain transforms patterns of light, sound waves, and other physical stimuli into a coherent, meaningful experience. The colors you see aren't physical properties of objects but creations of your mind. That red apple isn't inherently red. Your brain constructs that experience from wavelengths of light. This simple truth reveals something profound. Your conscious experience is a personal interpretation of reality, not reality itself. Next time you watch a sunset or admire a painting, consider the remarkable neural processes allowing you to experience colors in your unique way. Your perception differs subtly from everyone else's. The dress debate that divided the internet in 2015 offered a powerful glimpse into this truth. We each live in our own perceptual worlds. What reality will you discover today?